The church bells of St. Augustine Catholic Church in Baton Rouge had not rung properly since December 15, 2000. That humid winter night, unusual for Louisiana even in December, marked the beginning of a mystery that would haunt the parish community for nearly a quarter century. Father Patrick O'Brien, the young priest known for his unwavering dedication to church doctrine, vanished from his confessional booth, leaving behind only his silver cross and traces that suggested something terrible had occurred. Before we begin the story, write in the comments which city you're from. We're very interested to know where you're watching our video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. It was Sister Catherine who first noticed something was wrong. At 9:30 that evening, during her routine rounds to secure the church for the night, she found the confessional booth empty, its purple curtain partially torn. The silver cross that Father Patrick always wore lay on the wooden seat, and there were dark stains on the floor that forensic experts would later confirm were significant evidence. The confession schedule book, which Father Patrick meticulously maintained, was nowhere to be found. The investigation that followed would consume the Baton Rouge Police Department for months. Hundreds of parishioners were interviewed. The diocese conducted its own internal review. Search parties combed through the bayous and abandoned buildings surrounding the church. Yet Father Patrick O'Brien seemed to have vanished into the thick Louisiana night without a trace. 24 years later, in 2024, the truth would finally emerge from the most unexpected source. William Carr, an 89-year-old man dying of cancer in a hospice facility, requested a priest for his final confession. What he revealed in those last moments would not only solve the mystery of Father Patrick's disappearance, but also expose a dark secret that had been buried beneath the very foundation of the church itself. Father Patrick O'Brien had been just 32 years old when he arrived at St. Augustine Church in 1998. Fresh from seminary, he brought with him an enthusiasm that reinvigorated the aging parish. Parishioners remembered him as strict but fair, someone who believed deeply in the sanctity of confession and the importance of earthly justice alongside divine forgiveness. He used to say that some sins required legal accountability before spiritual absolution, recalled Mrs. Dorothy Hughes, who had been the church organist for 40 years. 3 days before his disappearance, several parishioners noticed Father Patrick seemed troubled. During morning mass on December 12th, he had spoken about the weight of secrets and the burden of knowledge. "Heavy is the heart that carries others' sins," he had said during his homily, his voice trembling slightly. Sister Catherine later testified that she had seen him reading what appeared to be an old police report at his desk, though she couldn't make out the details from where she stood. The church had 3 key figures who would become central to the investigation. William Carr, then 65 years old, served as the church handyman and was known for his generosity in volunteering for repairs and maintenance. He had been with the parish since 1976 and was considered a pillar of the community. Margaret Sullivan, 45, worked as the church secretary and managed the parish finances. She had been hired just 2 years earlier and was known for her meticulous record-keeping. Thomas Reed, 28, was a dedicated altar server who had recently returned to the church after what he described as some troubled years in his early 20s. On the morning of December 15th, Father Patrick conducted the regular 7 a.m. Mass. Witnesses reported he seemed distracted, forgetting parts of the liturgy he usually knew by heart. After the service, he spent most of the day in his office, refusing lunch and asking not to be disturbed. Margaret Sullivan later told investigators that she heard him on the phone around 2 p.m., saying something about old sins and the need for truth, though she couldn't hear the full conversation. The evening service began at 7 p.m. and concluded without incident, though Father Patrick's sermon about redemption and justice struck several parishioners as particularly intense. He kept talking about how secrets have a way of surfacing, how truth cannot remain buried forever, remembered John Morrison, a longtime church member. After the service, most parishioners left quickly due to the unusual humidity and threatening storm clouds. At 8:15 p.m., William Carr was seen entering the church through the side door. He later told police he had come to check on a leak in the vestry that Father Patrick had mentioned earlier. His presence wasn't unusual. As the church handyman, he often worked odd hours. Margaret Sullivan claimed she left the church at 8:30 p.m. after finishing some bookkeeping, though she seemed nervous when questioned about the exact time. Thomas Reed stated he had gone straight home after the evening service, arriving at his apartment around 8 p.m. The timeline became crucial. Security footage from a nearby business showed the church lights mysteriously going out at 9:15 p.m., 15 minutes before Sister Catherine's discovery. The power outage affected only the church building, not the surrounding area, suggesting someone had deliberately cut the lights. When Sister Catherine entered at 9:30 p.m., she initially thought there had been a power failure. She used her flashlight to navigate to the electrical panel, restored the lights, and that's when she noticed the confessional booth door ajar. What she found inside that booth would launch one of the longest-running missing persons cases in Louisiana history. The silver cross, a gift from Father Patrick's mother when he was ordained, lay on the bench as if carefully placed there. The dark stains on the floor formed a pattern that suggested something significant had occurred. Most troubling was the missing confession schedule book, which Father Patrick never let out of his sight. It contained the names and appointment times of everyone who had sought confession that week. The initial investigation focused on the obvious. Police searched the church grounds thoroughly, even bringing in cadaver dogs. They dragged the nearby retention pond and searched abandoned buildings within a 5-mile radius. The diocese cooperated fully, providing access to all church records and personnel files. Yet as days turned to weeks, the trail grew cold. One detail that investigators found particularly interesting was a construction invoice dated for January 2001. William Carr had submitted a proposal to build an addition to the church, a small prayer room attached to the main building. He offered to do the work at cost, asking only for materials to be covered. The church board, dealing with the trauma of Father Patrick's disappearance, gratefully accepted his generous offer. The construction began in February 2001 and was completed by Easter. Another puzzling element emerged when investigators searched Father Patrick's office more thoroughly. Hidden in a locked drawer, they found a police report from 1975 concerning the unsolved death of Eleanor Carr in New Orleans. The name immediately raised questions. When confronted, William Carr admitted Eleanor had been his wife, but claimed her death had been ruled accidental, a fall downstairs at their home. He couldn't explain why Father Patrick would have such a document. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to Margaret Sullivan when a routine audit revealed discrepancies in the church finances. Nearly $50,000 designated for the building fund had been moved to other accounts over the previous 6 months. Margaret insisted Father Patrick had authorized the transfers for emergency repairs, but no documentation supported her claim. Her nervous behavior during questioning made her a prime suspect. Thomas Reed, meanwhile, proved extraordinarily helpful to investigators. He provided detailed information about the church's routines, helped create a timeline of Father Patrick's last day, and even suggested checking with local hospitals and morgues in case Father Patrick had been injured and was unable to identify himself. His dedication to finding the missing priest impressed everyone, though some investigators noted he seemed almost too eager to help. The investigation took a dramatic turn when forensic accountants discovered the financial irregularities went deeper than initially suspected. The $50,000 wasn't just moved between accounts, it had been systematically withdrawn in small amounts over 6 months. Margaret Sullivan's signature appeared on every transaction, but she maintained Father Patrick had verbally approved each withdrawal. He said the church needed repairs that couldn't wait for official approval, she insisted during her third interview with detectives. Detective Raymond Foster, who led the investigation, found Margaret's explanation increasingly implausible. Security footage from the bank showed her making withdrawals alone, never accompanied by Father Patrick. More damaging was the discovery that several withdrawals occurred when Father Patrick was documented as being out of town at diocese conferences. The pressure mounted when investigators found she had been living beyond her means, with credit card debts exceeding $30,000. Yet something about the timing bothered Detective Foster. The financial irregularities had begun in June 2000, 6 months before Father Patrick's disappearance. If Margaret had been stealing and Father Patrick had discovered it, why wait until December to confront her? Thomas Reed offered a theory during one of his many voluntary visits to the police station. Father Patrick was thorough, he suggested. Maybe he spent months gathering evidence before confronting her. The investigation revealed more about William Carr's past. The 1975 police report concerning his wife Eleanor's death contained several inconsistencies. Neighbors had reported hearing arguments the night she died, and the medical examiner had noted injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. However, the case had been closed due to lack of evidence. When investigators pressed William about this, he became defensive. "That was 25 years ago," he said. "Eleanor's death was an accident. Father Patrick had no business digging into ancient history." A breakthrough came when Sister Catherine remembered a detail she had initially overlooked. The week before his disappearance, Father Patrick had asked her about the seal of confession. He wanted to know if there were any circumstances under which a priest could break the confessional seal, she recalled. "I told him the seal was absolute, except if someone's life was in immediate danger." He seemed troubled by my answer. Thomas Reed's volunteer schedule provided another puzzle piece. Investigators discovered he had submitted a request to change his altar server duties a week before Father Patrick's disappearance. The change would have given him access to the church during off hours, ostensibly to practice organ music for Christmas services. The request had been approved by Father Patrick himself, though the approval seemed hastily written, unlike his usual careful penmanship. The anonymous threatening letter Father Patrick received 3 days before his disappearance became a focus of analysis. The letter, composed of cut-out newspaper letters in classic ransom note style, read, "Some secrets should stay buried. Stop digging or join them." Handwriting experts couldn't analyze the composition, but the paper and glue used were common brands available at any office supply store. Interestingly, the church office had recently purchased the exact same supplies. As investigators dug deeper into William Carr's background, they discovered a connection that had been overlooked. In 1998, around the time Father Patrick arrived at St. Augustine, William had been questioned about a series of church thefts in the area. Nothing was ever proven, but several churches reported missing collection money during periods when William had done contract work for them. The amounts were never large enough to warrant extensive investigation, but the pattern was suggestive. Margaret Sullivan's alibi for the night of December 15th initially seemed solid. She claimed to have left the church at 8:30 p.m. and stopped at a pharmacy on her way home. When investigators checked, the pharmacy confirmed she had been there, but the timestamp on her receipt showed 9:45 p.m., not the 8:45 p.m. her timeline required. This hour-long gap became crucial to the investigation. Where had she been between leaving the church and arriving at the pharmacy? The broken rosary beads found in the church parking lot added another layer of mystery. They were expensive, made of genuine pearl, not the typical plastic beads most parishioners carried. The local religious goods store confirmed they had sold only 3 such rosaries in the past year. One to Father Patrick himself, one to a visiting bishop, and one to an unknown cash customer. The beads found in the parking lot didn't match Father Patrick's, which was found intact in his room. Thomas Reed's helpfulness extended to technological assistance. He volunteered to review hours of security footage from nearby businesses, helped organize search parties, and even created a database of all parishioners and their potential connections to Father Patrick. His IT skills proved invaluable, though some investigators wondered how a 28-year-old altar server had such sophisticated technical knowledge. The investigation revealed Father Patrick had been conducting his own inquiry into something before his disappearance. His computer history showed searches for Statute of Limitations Louisiana, mandatory reporting laws clergy, and unreported murders cold cases. He had also accessed numerous newspaper archives from 1975, all focusing on deaths in the New Orleans area. The pattern suggested he was investigating Eleanor Carr's death. But why? William Carr's behavior after Father Patrick's disappearance raised questions in retrospect. While he participated in search parties and expressed appropriate concern, he was also quick to suggest Father Patrick might have left voluntarily. "The pressure of the priesthood gets to some men," he told other parishioners. "Maybe he just needed to get away." This theory was undermined by the evidence found in the confessional and Father Patrick's abandoned car in the church parking lot. A witness came forward 3 months into the investigation with information that shifted focus back to the night of December 15th. Mrs. Angela Porter, who lived across from the church, reported seeing a figure in dark clothing loading something into a van around 9:20 p.m. that night. She hadn't reported it initially because she assumed it was routine church maintenance. The van, she said, belonged to the church and was typically used by William Carr for his handyman duties. The digital trail provided more questions than answers. Father Patrick's email account showed he had received several messages from an anonymous address in the weeks before his disappearance. The messages were cryptic, referencing old debts and prices to be paid. Its specialists traced the emails to the church's own computer system, but couldn't determine which specific computer had been used. The church had 3 computers accessible to staff, one in Father Patrick's office, one at Margaret's desk, and one in the community room that Thomas often used for youth ministry work. Financial forensics revealed another layer to the church's money troubles. Beyond the $50,000 Margaret couldn't properly account for, there was evidence of earlier irregularities dating back 2 years before Margaret's employment. These earlier discrepancies had been cleverly hidden through a series of construction overcharges and supply purchases that never materialized. The paperwork all bore William Carr's signature as the approving handyman, though he claimed Father Patrick's predecessor had authorized everything verbally. The turning point in the investigation came when Thomas Reed volunteered a crucial piece of information. He mentioned that on the night of December 15th, he had actually returned to the church around 8:45 p.m. to retrieve his forgotten wallet. He claimed he saw William's van in the parking lot and heard voices from inside the church, but didn't enter because he didn't want to interrupt what might have been a private counseling session. This statement contradicted his earlier claim of going straight home, but he insisted he had simply forgotten this detail in the trauma of Father Patrick's disappearance. By summer of 2001, the investigation had stalled. The church extension William Carr had built was complete, a beautiful prayer room that the parish dedicated to Father Patrick's memory. Margaret Sullivan had been charged with embezzlement, but maintained her innocence regarding Father Patrick's disappearance. Thomas Reed had left for seminary himself, saying he felt called to continue Father Patrick's work. The case gradually grew cold, becoming another unsolved mystery in Louisiana's long history of unexplained disappearances. For 23 years, the mystery of Father Patrick O'Brien remained unsolved. The church extension built by William Carr became a peaceful prayer room where parishioners lit candles for their missing priest. Margaret Sullivan was convicted of embezzlement but served only 2 years, always maintaining Father Patrick had authorized the transfers. Thomas Reed completed seminary and became Father Thomas, serving a parish in Texas. Life moved on, but the question of what happened that humid December night in 2000 lingered like morning mist over the bayou. Then, in March 2024, William Carr, now 89 years old, was admitted to St. Joseph's Hospice with terminal lung cancer. The doctors gave him weeks at most. As his body failed, something in his conscience stirred. He requested a priest for last rites, specifically asking for someone from outside the local diocese. Father Anthony Moreau from Lafayette arrived on March 15th, prepared for a routine final confession. What William Carr revealed in that hospice room would finally solve the 24-year-old mystery. "Father, I need to tell you about Father Patrick O'Brien," he wheezed through his oxygen mask. "I've carried this burden too long. I killed him. I killed the young priest, and I killed my wife Eleanor in 1975. Father Moreau, bound by the seal of confession, faced an agonizing dilemma until William gave him permission to contact authorities after his death, saying he wanted the truth known. The confession was remarkable in its detail. William explained that on December 15, 2000, he had scheduled a confession with Father Patrick. For months, the young priest had been investigating Eleanor Carr's death, having received an anonymous tip from someone who had witnessed William pushing his wife down the stairs. Father Patrick had confronted William with the evidence during confession, telling him that while the confessional seal was sacred, he could not grant absolution for an unconfessed murder without William turning himself in to authorities. He said earthly justice must precede heavenly forgiveness for such a grave sin, William recalled. "I panicked. I couldn't go to prison at my age. When he stood to leave the confessional, saying he would give me 3 days to turn myself in, or he would have to act on information received outside confession, I acted on instinct." The details of what happened next were minimal, respecting the boundaries of what could be shared, but William confirmed Father Patrick died instantly from the confrontation that ensued. The cover-up, William revealed, had been meticulously planned, but also involved an unexpected accomplice. After the incident, William had been discovered by Thomas Reed, who had indeed returned for his wallet. But Thomas didn't call the police. Instead, he helped William move Father Patrick's body to the church van. The reason, William explained, was blackmail that went both ways. Thomas had been dealing drugs in 1998, and William had evidence that could send him to prison. Meanwhile, Thomas had witnessed enough to ensure William's conviction for murder. "It was mutually assured destruction," William confessed. "Thomas helped me hide the body temporarily while we figured out a permanent solution. That's when I proposed building the church extension. The foundation work would provide the perfect opportunity." The construction project, presented as a generous donation to honor the missing priest, was actually his tomb. Father Patrick's remains were buried beneath the concrete foundation of the prayer room in February 2001. Father Moreau contacted authorities immediately after William Carr's death on March 18, 2024. The deathbed confession, given with permission to share, provided probable cause for a thorough investigation. Ground-penetrating radar was brought to St. Augustine Church, and the results were unmistakable. An anomaly consistent with human remains lay beneath the prayer room floor, exactly where William had indicated. The exhumation took place on March 25, 2024, under overcast skies that reminded many of that humid night in 2000. When investigators carefully removed the concrete and dug beneath, they found Father Patrick's remains, still wearing his clerical collar, his prayer book clutched in his hands. The silver cross that had been left in the confessional was missing, but everything else matched William's confession. Forensic analysis confirmed the identity through dental records and DNA comparison with Father Patrick's surviving sister. The investigation into Thomas Reed, now Father Thomas, began immediately. When authorities arrived at his Texas parish, they found he had already prepared a full written confession. "I've been waiting for this day for 24 years, he told the arresting officers. His statement corroborated William's account, but added crucial details. The anonymous tip about Eleanor Carr's murder had come from Eleanor's sister, who had always suspected William, but never had proof. Father Patrick had spent months verifying the information outside the confessional before that fatal confrontation. Thomas revealed he had orchestrated many of the false leads during the original investigation. The broken rosary beads were planted to suggest a struggle in the parking lot. He had sent the anonymous threatening emails from the church computer to make it seem like Father Patrick had multiple enemies. Most significantly, he had manipulated the investigation toward Margaret Sullivan, knowing about her embezzlement and using it to deflect suspicion. "I told myself I was protecting the church from scandal," Thomas wrote in his confession. "But really, I was protecting myself. William knew about my past, about the drugs I'd sold to teenagers in 1998. 3 kids had overdosed on what I sold them. They survived, but barely. If that came out, my life would have been over. So I helped him, and then I spent 24 years trying to atone by becoming the priest Father Patrick should have been." The revelation sent shockwaves through both parishes. In Baton Rouge, the St. Augustine community struggled to reconcile their memory of helpful, generous William Carr with the reality of him as a double murderer. The prayer room he had built as a tomb had been where hundreds had found solace over the years, lighting candles and praying, never knowing they were standing above Father Patrick's remains. The church held a proper funeral mass on April 3, 2024, with Father Patrick finally laid to rest in the church cemetery with full honors. The investigation revealed how close authorities had come to the truth in 2001. Detective Raymond Foster, now retired, reviewed his old notes and found he had flagged the timing of the church extension as suspicious. William volunteering to build it so soon after the disappearance, practically for free, should have been a bigger red flag, he admitted. But he was such a fixture in the community, above suspicion. And Thomas Reed was so helpful, always steering us toward other theories. We were masterfully manipulated. Margaret Sullivan, now 69, was formally exonerated of any involvement in Father Patrick's disappearance. While she had embezzled funds, she had nothing to do with the murder. "I always knew Father Patrick wouldn't have just disappeared," she said. "He was too dedicated to his calling. I'm glad the truth finally came out, even if it's horrifying to know he was beneath our feet all those years while we prayed for his safe return." The case files revealed the extent of Thomas Reed's manipulation. He had volunteered to review security footage and had deliberately deleted segments showing William's van leaving the church late that night. He had created the database of parishioners but had carefully omitted key information about William's past. Most disturbing, he had provided false alibis and timeline information that made it nearly impossible for investigators to piece together the truth. The discovery prompted a review of cold cases throughout Louisiana. If William Carr had killed his wife in 1975 and Father Patrick in 2000, investigators wondered if there were other victims. A search of his property revealed no additional evidence, but investigators found journals dating back decades. The journals didn't confess to other crimes, but revealed a man consumed by guilt, yet unable to face justice. "Every sunrise reminds me of what I've done," one entry read, "but prison would kill me faster than cancer ever could." Father Thomas was extradited to Louisiana and charged with accessory after the fact to murder, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. During his arraignment, he stood in the same courtroom where Margaret Sullivan had been tried for embezzlement 23 years earlier. He pleaded guilty to all charges, refusing a plea deal that would have reduced his sentence. "I've lived with this for too long," he told the judge. "I deserve whatever punishment the court sees fit." The psychological evaluation of Father Thomas revealed a complex individual tortured by guilt, but also driven by self-preservation. The psychiatrist noted that his decision to become a priest seemed genuinely motivated by remorse, but it was also a form of hiding in plain sight. He created a new identity as a devoted priest to escape his past as a drug dealer and accomplice to murder, the report stated. The tragedy is that by all accounts he was actually a good priest, beloved by his parishioners, which makes his crimes all the more shocking. Sister Catherine, now 79, provided crucial testimony about Father Patrick's final days. She revealed that he had actually confided in her about his moral dilemma, though not the specifics. He asked me what I would do if I knew about a terrible crime but couldn't act on the knowledge because of how I learned it, she testified. I told him to pray for guidance. I've wished every day since that I had pressed him for details. Maybe if I had, he'd still be alive. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. William Carr's hospice room had been equipped with a recording system for medical purposes. While Father Moreau's confession with William was not recorded, William's conversation with his nurse afterward was. In it, he said, "I finally told someone about Patrick and Eleanor. After I'm gone, make sure the police know where to look. Under the prayer room. I built their tomb myself." This recording, made with William's knowledge and consent, provided additional confirmation of the confession's authenticity. On September 15, 2024, Father Thomas was sentenced to 25 years in prison for his role in covering up Father Patrick's murder. At 52 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. In his final statement to the court, he said, "I failed Father Patrick, I failed my parishes, and I failed God. I helped hide a murder to protect my own secrets. I pray that my confession brings some peace to Father Patrick's family and to all those who loved him." The Archdiocese of Baton Rouge established a memorial fund in Father Patrick O'Brien's name, dedicated to supporting seminary students who show his same commitment to justice and truth. The prayer room built over his grave was demolished and rebuilt with a memorial plaque that reads, "In memory of Father Patrick O'Brien, 1968-2000. May truth always triumph over darkness." Father Patrick's sister, Mary O'Brien Morrison, now 60, spoke at the memorial service. "My brother believed in justice, both divine and earthly," she said through tears. "It took 24 years, but both forms of justice have finally been served. Patrick always said that truth cannot remain buried forever. He was right, even about his own death. We can finally mourn him properly and remember him not as a mystery, but as the dedicated priest and brother he was." The case became a cautionary tale about the danger of above-suspicion individuals and the complexity of religious authority in criminal investigations. Legal scholars debated the implications of the confessional seal and whether reforms were needed. The consensus remained that the seal was sacred, but Father Patrick's case highlighted the tragic consequences when criminals exploit religious protections. Detective Raymond Foster came out of retirement to close the case file officially. In his final report, he wrote, "The murder of Father Patrick O'Brien was solved not through investigative brilliance, but through the conscience of a dying man. It reminds us that some secrets are too heavy to carry to the grave." William Carr's confession and Thomas Reed's subsequent admission brought closure to a case that haunted our department for over 2 decades. The story made national news, with true crime podcasts and documentary crews descending on Baton Rouge. The church, trying to heal from the shocking revelations, limited media access and focused on supporting its congregation through the trauma. Many parishioners struggled with the fact that they had prayed alongside William Carr for years, never suspecting he was capable of murder. In a final irony, investigators discovered that the anonymous tipster who had informed Father Patrick about Eleanor Carr's murder had died in 2010. Never knowing their information had led to Father Patrick's death. Eleanor's sister had carried her suspicions for 25 years before finally reaching out to Father Patrick in 2000, hoping a priest could convince William to confess. Instead, her attempt at finding justice for her sister had resulted in another tragedy. The case was officially closed on October 1, 2024. 2 murders, separated by 25 years, were finally solved. William Carr died taking responsibility for his crimes. Father Thomas began serving his sentence, teaching literacy to other inmates as a form of penance. And Father Patrick O'Brien, after 24 years beneath the foundation of his own church, was finally at rest in consecrated ground, his dedication to truth vindicated at last. The bells of St. Augustine Church were repaired in November 2024, funded by donations from around the world. When they rang for the first time in nearly 24 years, the sound carried across Baton Rouge a bittersweet reminder that while justice may be delayed, truth has a way of surfacing, even from beneath concrete and years of deception. The humid Louisiana night that had swallowed Father Patrick O'Brien whole in December 2000 had finally given up its secrets, bringing closure to one of the state's most enduring mysteries.